My name is Julie Heusser. Um, I proudly say that I was born in the territory of Alaska, so I'm from Alaska. Um, I was, to the best of my knowledge, the first professional woman on the slope, and I was one of the very first PEs for BP. And my first job, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I loved it. We were so busy. We were doing everything. And it was in the days when nobody really understood what the data meant. We were, collecting data. We were uh, open hole logging, and we were production logging, and we were all sorts of things. But the reservoir had not really been defined, and so we were logging up a storm and collecting information so people could put their brains to it and see what it really meant. And it was a big oil field. Um, they knew that going in. So I was there early on. When I started, it was July 1st, 1977. And I was just excited to do that work. And at that time, on the western operating area alone, I want to say we had 5 or 6 rigs running, and there were only 2 engineers per shift, 2 petroleum engineers, and we were just working like fiends. There were times when I didn't come home for days. I'd be out on a job, and I was talking with Al Schmoyer earlier, and he reminded me that I was the only person, because of my height, that I could lay across the front seat of the truck and take a nap and nobody could see me. And so they always learned to look in the trucks. But anyway, lots of work, lots of rigs, production logging, trying to understand what it all meant. We were collecting all the data that we could on anything. I mean, when we were doing production loggings, we had the wells in the test separator, and we were out there, taking pressure data because we didn't know what was useful and what wasn't. So we just got as much as we could and sent it all in it for the people in town to make heads or tails of it. And I worked with a lot of great people, and I always tell my colleagues that everything I know about open hole logging operations and interpretation, I learned from the best Schlumberger hands on the slope, because they had the top-notch people up there at the time. They had their best crews up there, and so I was really fortunate. And I was straight out of college, and I'd show up to a logging job, and I'd have all my log interpretation books under my arm, and I'd walk up and I'd say, "Okay, here's the deal. I'll do my interpretation. You do yours. We'll compare notes, and we'll see. We'll see what I know and what I don't know." I learned from the best, and it was so much. If work can be fun, it was fun. I loved what I was doing. And people were helpful. They answered all of my questions, and I had a lot of questions. And I worked for a man named Gary Pliska in town. And basically, what he told us was that we couldn't hire any roustabouts to do, lay flare line or change out tree valves, or change out pipeline valves, or do this or that, until we could do it ourselves. So I can't tell you how many roustabouts I taught, how to put together chick sand and lay flare line and all of that. And we had to do it all. We did. We had to do it all. And so I was in a very fortunate position, because the people that came afterwards, they just didn't have to do that. And I learned all sorts of skills that proved useful later on. if you count the Trans-Alaska Pipeline part, I retired in 2012, and when I say Trans-Alaska Pipeline part, I just did engineering work in support of some lawyers. All the owners of the taps were getting sued all the time, and they needed all the data, and I was part of a team that went in and got data for them. So from 1977 to 2013, 23, 30, a long time. You know, I'd like to say I was fortunate because I worked with good people, and they, once they got over the surprise, they just accepted what I brought to the party. And I'd go out to the rigs, and I'd be sitting there in the break room, and these guys have been up on the rig for weeks at a time, and they see a female, and they start to chat you up. Well, the way I always handled that was I made sure I knew their name, I made sure I knew their wife's name, their children's name, whether or not they were going through communion. So I just kind of subtly laid down the rules that I wasn't available for anything but business. And they got the message real quick. And so I think that I was fortunate in that because I was the first, people were willing to help me. People were willing, if I needed something, and I'd go, where would I find? Somebody'd say, I know where you can find that. So I had a real positive experience. Well, there are just some individuals that no matter what year it was, whether it be 1977 or it be 2023, a number of people felt like there was no room for women in the oil field. As a matter of fact, in my first petroleum engineering class, the head of the department came in and introduced himself to the class, and he came right out and said, there's no room for women in the industry. I was the only woman in the class. So who was he talking to? So, that's where I went to school. And, but I got the best job ever. They can think what they want, but I know that my colleagues and I did good work, and nobody can take that away. I went to Colorado School of Mines, and when I went there in 1973, I was part of their first intake of women. There were 35 of us that first year in a student body of 2,000, and the next year I was one of 6. And then, in subsequent years, they enrolled more women, but it was a lonely thing to do. Other than it was really exciting times, things were rocking and rolling in those early years. I mean, you didn't have time to do anything but work. And a good thing it was interesting work, and I worked with a lot of good people. Engineers, operators, company men, drillers, service company people. I spent a lot of time in mud labs. And in the course of my career, I just talked about the early years, but I was, I worked on a lot of interesting projects over the years, and I am grateful because not everybody has jobs like that. Stick to it because you can do it. If that's where your interest leads you, you can do it. I did it. And it wasn't not easy. I'm not saying it was easy, but it was worthwhile for me. And I just find science and mathematics and engineering, I find all of that fascinating. I mean, put me in front of a, a wellhead or an operation, and I love to think about it and think it through and understand what's going on. It's just it's there's just so much to it. Never I won't say never a boring moment, because there's always those, but there's just a lot of interesting things that you can get involved with, and it's worth your time.